Morgan Housel recently released his new book called The Psychology of Money. In this video, we're going to review 5 points that I loved from this book. Along the way, I'll share some personal reflections that I've had as an entrepreneur reading this book. I'm Will, and if you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing. Every week, I talk about something related to sales, digital marketing, and entrepreneurship to take you from zero to self-starter. As usual, you can use these timestamps to help you navigate throughout this video, but without further ado, let's jump into the psychology of money. The book, Psychology of Money, is structured in mini lessons, and one of the best lessons that he points out is that no one is crazy. Housel's perspective in this chapter is that everyone's perspective is valid, and it's important for you to factor that in when you think about your own biases when you think about money. An example that Housel shares is if you're in your wealth building years, in the years immediately after the Great Depression, you're naturally going to be a lot more pessimistic than somebody that's been building their wealth over the course of the last decade. So his main takeaway is to consider the differences that everybody has in their life experiences and the different biases as to why they might think a certain way. I see this sort of bias and perspective in the startup space a lot. Over just the last 5 years, it's become significantly less risky as well as easier to create a new venture. And as a result, startups are all the craze. It's way easier and faster for you to create that e-commerce brand or that online business that you've been dreaming of because the barrier to entry is so much lower. But ultimately, when you take a step back and you think about it, somebody in our parents' generation didn't have the luxury of advanced computing or Moore's Law kicking into effect, in which now we have computers that are so advanced that they allow us to do all these sorts of systems and processes that we wouldn't have been able to do just 2 decades earlier. The second key point that I wanted to go over that Housel writes about is the role of risk and luck. The main takeaway from this chapter is that people tend to overweight their own contributions over the role of luck in their successes. And to further belabor this point, he speaks about how just as one person can be super lucky, another person can be super unlucky. He includes a great story in the book about Bill Gates and Kent Evans. Kent Evans had a really similar upbringing to Bill Gates in terms of opportunities, the school that they went to, which happened to be one of the few high schools that had computers at that time, and they had very different life tales in terms of how their lives played out. While Bill Gates obviously had the fortunate opportunity to create Microsoft in the time that he did, Kent Evans actually suffered from a tragic mountain climbing accident when he was still a teenager. Housel tries to make the point here about just how lucky Bill Gates was in relation to his very good friend, Kent Evans. Just as lucky as Bill Gates was in creating this once-in-a-generation company, Kent Evans also was equally as unlucky in experiencing this mountain climbing accident when there are very few of them in the United States every year. I tend to agree a lot with this strategy. In fact, I've run a series of niche sites in the past. I'll apply the same SEO strategy, the same keyword research, the same budget, similar writers, and I'll get vastly different results. There's just a ton of factors to break down when it comes down to creating a niche site. There's things like the niche, the competition, the writer quality, and even just the timing of when you created your site versus others. So what's funny to me is that when I've invested in each of these projects, I've always set aside the same starter budget, but have had vastly different results. Some of the sites become profitable within 6 to 12 months, whereas other sites are complete duds and they only make $1 or $2 every single month. I attribute these outcomes to luck and timing. Ultimately, when you're playing long-term SEO, a lot of the wins that you'll experience are only realized if you're willing to play the game for a longer period of time and expand your time horizon. And it works. If you take a step back and look year over year as opposed to day after day, you can see the year over year growth of these sorts of sites when you're able to invest consistent effort towards whatever you're building. Ultimately, whatever you're building, it's important that you don't underestimate the role of luck and timing to your success. Comment below if you agree with the author here in terms of our tendency to underestimate the role of luck and risk in our success. The third point that I wanted to highlight from the book was understanding what enough is. Housel states that it was the inability to figure out what that enough point was that essentially led to the demise of the former CEO of McKinsey and Bernie Madoff. It wasn't necessarily because they didn't create legitimate value early in their career that doomed them. It was the fact that they weren't able to actually recognize when they had enough money to take a step back and look at what else was important in life. One of the things that I think is really important for everybody to go through their own journey on is understanding where a value of a dollar comes from. For me, it really happened coming right out of college. At that point in time, I had the opportunity to take a healthy salary with a management consulting company, but I ultimately decided to join the startup that I've been building and take pretty much a poverty level salary. And it was during that entire year of earning close to nothing that I truly understood what it meant to earn a dollar and cherish that dollar. That's how I figured out what my enough point was, and it was from that that I was then able to understand and cherish more of our successes as our business grew. Ultimately, that time period was super humbling for my ego and also taught me what I truly valued about money and what I didn't value about money. And what I realized was after a while, you figure out what your enough point is, and from there, the rest of it is all just gravy. Before I head into tip number 4, if you're finding this video interesting, do me a favor and hit that like button below. The fourth point I wanted to highlight from the Psychology of Money was the chapter on Tails You Win. Housel brings in the example of a traditional venture capital firm in which a VC firm is going to invest in 50 companies, expect more than half of them to fail, but the reality is that 2 or 3 of those companies are going to be the ones that deliver exponential returns to the firm. I can relate to this even with this YouTube channel. When I was mapping out different video ideas for my first few videos, I thought my SEMrush tutorials were gonna be way more popular than my Facebook Marketplace videos. In fact, I only made the Facebook Marketplace videos because I wanted a low-key starter topic that I felt comfortable speaking on as I started to learn how to create videos on YouTube. But lo and behold, months later, my SEMrush tutorials are less popular than my Facebook Marketplace videos. And my Facebook Marketplace videos make up 35% of the people that subscribe to this channel. This sort of pattern of tilted returns towards 20% of your videos making up 80% of your results is something that's not just uncommon to me, but it's common across the entire space. Not just YouTube, but in other industries as well. So my takeaway for other creators that might be watching this is don't get too attached to just one thing that you're building. Ultimately, just spread your bets multiple times and then see what sticks. Sometimes you'll be surprised when the thing that you thought was going to perform the worst actually performs the best. But the most important thing to remember is to commit to doing the work, because if you don't get to, for example, 100 videos created, then you never get to actually experience the tail end effects that get you those exponential returns. As Housel, the author, writes, Tails wins everything. The fifth point I wanted to share from the Psychology of Money was the chapter on freedom. In this chapter, Housel writes about how controlling your time is the highest dividend that money can pay. He states that money's greatest intrinsic value is its ability to give you control of your time. To illustrate this point, he brings up the story of Derek Sivers, who also happens to be one of my favorite entrepreneurs. When Derek was 22 years old, he was making $20K a year and he had a low cost of living. So once he was able to save up $12K, he was able to quit his job, take a few extra gigs on the side since he was a musician to sustain his living. Ultimately, he was free because he was able to quit his job and not work another job again. But one of his friends happened to ask him, hey Derek, what about that time that you sold your company CD Baby for $22 million? Derek's response was that that didn't make a big difference. It was simply more money in the bank. He had discovered the value of freedom at the age of 22. Housel writes about how we are all pretty similar in that we value quality friendships, we value feeling like we're part of something bigger than ourselves, and when we have kids, if we have kids, that we get unstructured time with them, and a lot of it. I love this chapter and wholeheartedly agree. In fact, I thought it aligned really well with the writings of Ramit Sethi in the book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. Ramit talks about the definition of a rich life being one with good health, close relationship with friends and family, and a fulfilling career. As I've gotten older as an entrepreneur, controlling my time has become one of the biggest levers that I am actively always trying to adapt. In my earlier days when we had less success, I had less control over my time because I was putting out fires. Whereas now, as things have gotten better, we've been able to hire more people to do more work, and as a result, I'm able to focus more on strategic priorities than just being on the grounds every single day. I talk about this sort of theme in other videos on my channel when I talk about the importance of valuing your time, hiring virtual assistants to help delegate for you, and to make sure that you're working on your business as opposed to in your business. There are 2 big takeaways from today's video. The first one is to not underestimate the role of luck whenever you are building something. You can just look at the personal finance space within YouTube to see both successes and failures when it comes to timing, luck, and risk. For example, as much as I love them, I don't think that channels like Our Rich Journey would have experienced the same level of success had they started YouTube in 2020 than a few years before. By being one of the first couples to talk about personal finance on YouTube, they were able to be one of the leaders in the space over time as the personal finance niche grew. The second big takeaway is to play games for the tails events. You're never really gonna know which of the efforts that you're taking is going to be the one that hits it big, and so it's better for you to expand your time horizon and keep playing the game. If you found some of the takeaways thought-provoking in today's video, I'd appreciate it if you do me a favor and hit that like button below. By doing so, you'll help this video get discovered by more people that are interested in these sorts of topics. Now it's your turn. Tell me in the comments below, what's an important lesson about money that you believe in, and how did you learn that lesson? Feel free to share this video with anybody that you think might benefit, and stay tuned because in the next video, I'm gonna go over the 5 other key points that I liked from this book. If you're already convinced that this could be a good read for you, you can pick up a copy of The Psychology of Money using the link in the video description below. By doing so, you'll also help support the channel. That's it for this time. I'll catch you guys next time when I cover 5 more takeaways from this book. In the meantime, check out these videos that YouTube thinks you might like.